Anti-gravity is an idea of creating a place or object that is free from the force of gravity. It does not refer to the lack of weight under gravity experienced in free fall or orbit, or to balancing the force of gravity with some other force, such as electromagnetism or aerodynamic lift. Anti-gravity is a recurring concept in science fiction, particularly in the context of spacecraft propulsion.
There is a little-known analogy between electromagnetism and gravity, which is derived from the fact that they are both vector field functions. James Clerk Maxwell was the first to derive the equations for the divergence and curl of the vector field. These equations became famously known as Maxwell's equations, which are the foundation of conventional electromagnetic theory. The delta operator, which is designated as an upside-down triangle, is called a gradient, which basically tells us the direction of greatest change in the vector field. The divergence tells us the amount by which it changes when we move in this direction. The divergence is designated by a gradient dot product operator with it's the upside-down triangle with the period next to it. And the curl gives us the axis of rotation of a paddle wheel if we were to place it in the vector field and see which direction it rotated. The curl is designated by the cross product, which is the x, the delta operator followed by an x. But now, just as electromagnetism breaks down into the electric field and magnetic field components, gravity can be broken down into gravitoelectric and gravitomagnetic components. The analogy is as follows. Magnetism is just a relativistically induced force caused by the movement of electric charge. Take a charge q and move it through a space a distance d, and it will produce a magnetic field which curls around the loop of the wire in a corkscrew. The direction of the magnetic field is determined by using the right-hand rule, a very important tool in physics, and especially electromagnetism. If you run current through a wire, the motion of the electrons passing through the wire will produce a magnetic field around the wire. So take your right hand and point your thumb in the direction of the current, and as the electrons move in the direction of your thumb, they produce a magnetic field in the direction which your fingers curl. So if we take a coil of wire and trace the movement of the electrons passing through it, using the right-hand rule, we can see how the magnetic fields all add up to produce a single large magnetic field. This is how electromagnetics work. Just as the presence of charge creates an electric field, the presence of mass produces a gravitoelectric field, which creates the gravity that keeps you and I grounded to this huge giant chunk of space rock. So just as the motion of an electric charge through space produces a magnetic field, the motion of a mass through space creates a gravitomagnetic field. It is the very nature of gravitomagnetism which our scientists are just beginning to understand. NASA's Gravity Probe B will likely give us some clues once the results come back later this year. I recommend you go to nasa.gov and read up on Gravity Probe B, even though NASA is basically just a PR-friendly cover-up for the government's real space programs. They still have a lot of legitimate scientists working for them, and their research is still legit, even though we all know what goes on inside Building 8 of the Kennedy Space Center, thanks to Disclosure Project Witness number 19. But anyways, the point of this video is to explain anti-gravity. We've already gone over the basics, and we know how to make an electromagnet. Now we need to figure out a way to make a gravitomagnet. But first we need to talk about magnetic levitation. Scientists have experimentally shown that it is possible to levitate a frog using strong magnetic fields, but the fields need to be oscillating back and forth because a unidirectional field produces rotation which needs to be stabilized in order to keep the object balanced in one place. However, superconductors will levitate in a constant magnetic field due to the Meissner effect, which is a result of diamagnetism, which is a form of magnetism that is only exhibited by a substance in the presence of an externally applied magnetic field. This is the same thing that levitates the frogs, diamagnetism. Superconductors and superfluids are both examples of Bose-Einstein condensates, which is kind of like a fifth state of matter. A superconductor conducts electricity with zero resistance, while a superfluid flows through a container with zero resistance. Friction is totally eliminated. A superfluid will pour straight through a ceramic container because it is porous, It'll also flow through the tiniest hole instantly because all the atoms in a superfluid reduce to a single wave function, which obeys Bose-Einstein's statistics instead of fermionic statistics. The Pauli exclusion principle states that no two atoms, or fermions, or matter particles, can occupy the same space at the same time, but the atoms in a Bose-Einstein condensate become bosons, or force particles, which do not obey the Pauli exclusion principle and can all fit through the tiniest hole at the same time, even if it's only one atom wide. As long as it's wide enough to let one through, they can all fit through at the same exact time because of this. A Russian scientist by the name of Eugene Podkletnov was doing superconductor research in a laboratory in Finland when he discovered a strange effect produced by rotating superconductors. It turns out that these rotating superconductors produced gravitomagnetic fields that were trillions of orders of magnitude larger than were previously predicted by quantum mechanics. I have a link to the Podkletnov paper, which he co-authored with Italian physicist Giovanni Maldenese, in the description. Similar studies were done in Vienna, Austria by Martin Tajmar, who has a paper titled Gravitomagnetic Field of a Rotating Superconductor or Superfluid, and also in America by a Chinese-American physicist, Ning Li, and Douglas Torr of the University of Alabama. Ning Li was so thrilled with the results of her research and her discoveries that she started her own company, AC Gravity Ltd., which immediately got a DoD contract, and no one has heard from her since. She's probably working at Area 51. Edgar Fouché holds degrees in aeronautical engineering and has all the scientific background to have worked at Area 51. In an interview on British television, he disclosed details of the Aurora project, which was to reverse engineer technology from crashed alien spacecraft. He described the anti-gravity drive of the TR-3B flying triangle, and I am actually going to post this video as a response to that video because he confirms everything I just said and all the work of all the research I just cited. The mercury-based plasma he is referring to is a superfluid ferrofluid, which is supercooled to 150 degrees Kelvin, or the lambda point at which the fluid becomes a Bose-Einstein condensate. This allows the fluid to rotate around the container with zero friction, which means it never slows down. However, there are problems with rotating a superfluid because there is no friction. Rotating the container it is in does nothing because you rotate the sides of the container, it just doesn't do anything because there's no friction force pushing the atoms around. So you can rotate the container, it won't rotate the fluid. You can also try to stir it in a circle, but it only makes the atoms rotate on their individual axis. It doesn't make the fluid rotate as a whole. So this is why we need a ferrofluid, or a magnetic fluid, which will move in the presence of a magnetic field, thus allowing us to rotate the fluid using magnets, or electromagnets. The result is the superfluid anti-gravity centrifuge, which has no limit to how fast it can spin other than the centripetal force that holds the container together, and prevents the sides from busting out as a result of the centrifugal force being exerted on the walls by the fluid inside. So, there you have it. There's all the scientific background on anti-gravity, and I encourage everyone to do their own research. I am providing you with the sources and putting all the pieces together, but this isn't something that you learn and fully understand after watching a 10-minute YouTube video. It takes a PhD in physics, unless you're the next Richard Feynman. Disclosure Project witness Jonathan Wagant gives some details about the mercury-based plasma he witnessed at a crash site in Peru. I have links to that video in the description. And there is also some evidence to suggest that the Nazis were working on this Wunderwaffe technology, as the details of the so-called Bell experiment are consistent with everything we just talked about. I have links to all this stuff, again, in the descriptions. I hope this helps answer some questions for people and opens the doors to anti-gravity and space exploration, which would be awesome. It would be great if we could not have to build giant rockets that pollute in order to blast things into space. It would be great if we could just have a little flying saucer disc type thing to fly into space. This also makes sense and is consistent with the reports of flying saucers, because their shape would be consistent with a craft that would be rotating superfluid around the inside at a high speed. It basically explains why they're shaped like that and why they choose that design and that shape, because of the engine that's inside of it. So, again, don't forget to rate 5 stars and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I hope you enjoyed the video. There's plenty more to come.
The Nazi anti-gravity machine known as Die Glocke. Die Glocke, which translates to the bell, was said to be one of the Nazi Wunderwaffe, their wonder weapons. Die Glocke was described by the Polish journalist and writer Igor Witkowski as part of Prada, or Wunderwaffe. Other authors would pick up on the story in later years, associating it with the occultism of Nazis and research into free energy and anti-gravity. Witkowski learned about Die Glocke after he obtained access to transcripts of the interrogation of the SS officer Jacob Spornberg. The German officer spoke of an experiment carried out in secret at the hidden Nazi base Der Riese in the Owl Mountains near the Czech border. Several authors have speculated that the device, which we still don't understand, may have been some form of time travel machine. According to an article published by Patrick Heiger in the National Geographic, Die Glocke has become a popular speculation topic, and there's been something of a fandom formed around not just Die Glocke, but also the other supposed Wunderwaffen. The bell was said to be an occult weapon based on technology beyond anything that humans could produce. Even so, the chance that there is some revolutionary device like this hidden away somewhere has certainly sparked the imagination of writers. Some writers, such as Jan van Helsing and Vladimir Terzicki, were more than happy to mix facts and fiction and create mystical weapons, secret societies, Nazi esotericism, and UFOs, which became a really popular topic in the 50s. So, just what is the bell? The bell was an experiment supposedly undertaken by Nazi scientists who worked for the SS at the facility Der Riese, which is German for the giant, near the Czech border. The bell itself is described as being a device made from hard and heavy metals, approximately 2.7 meters in diameter, and between 3.7 and 4.6 meters high. It gets the name because it is shaped like a bell. According to an interview Cook did with Witkowski, the device contains 2 counter-rotating cylinders that were filled with a violet liquid similar to mercury. The Germans called the liquid Serum S25, and it would be stored in tall, thin thermos flasks, encapsulated in lead and kept a meter off the ground. The experiments were said to include other substances, including Leichtmetall, light metal, like thorium, and beryllium peroxides. Witkowski described the bell as having a range of up to 200 meters when activated. It would have deadly effects on all living beings within this range, freezing their blood and destroying all their organic tissue. The Polish journalist would explain the purpose of Die Glocke was generating anti-gravity propulsion. This is why the device was secured to the ground using thick and heavy chains. Now, it's also said that 5 of the 7 scientists working on the project, which was headed up by physicist Walter Gerlach, died under unknown circumstances. Witkowski details in his book that a French scientist by the name of Eli Carton had taken major steps in the field of anti-gravity following the First World War, though the anti-gravity that his machine was purported to have produced was insignificant and of no practical use. Die Glocke could have been built around the technology Carton established, however. Witkowski claims there is some external evidence that shows a concrete structure, nicknamed the Henge, near the Wenceslas mine, around 3.1 kilometers southeast of the main Sokolet complex of the Riese project, which may have been a testing ground for the anti-gravity propulsion generated by die block. However, some believe that the abandoned structure might just be the remnants of an industrial cooling tower. Whether or not the bell even exists remains one of the Nazis' best kept secrets. One thing we do know is that Der Riese was a real place, and it was made up of underground facilities built from Charles Castle in 1943, complete with tunnels, telephone wires, railways, and more. Now, the labor force working on the project were some 13,000 prisoners, the majority of whom were taken from Auschwitz. According to the testimony of the architect behind the project, Albert Speer, the budget for the project was 150 million mark.